At the top of my Rebel episode, I remarked that Rebel was one of my most anticipated issues out of the Heroes Reborn event. Well, today's issue is the most anticipated issue for me. Part of the reason for my interest matches the same reason that Rebel had, that some of the characters that we will meet today will go on to appear ever so briefly in Thunderbolts Volume 1, in a plotline that runs from vaguely issues 50 to issue 75. Again, I love Thunderbolts Volume 1, and I had no problem learning who those characters were and how they fit into the storyline when I read it. A lot of the credit for that storytelling expertise belongs to the author of that plotline, and of today's issue, Fabian Nicieza. Fabian Nicieza is perhaps one of my favorite comic book authors. I have read so many comics that he's written. New Warriors, X-Force, Cable and Deadpool, Thunderbolts, New Thunderbolts, the 90s era X-Men book after Chris Claremont left, the Gambit ongoing series, Night Thrasher, Nomad, a whole number of miniseries too. He has always had a penchant for well-written characters, making sure that they have interesting personalities before slapping them into an ongoing series. He's also really good at mining continuities for ideas, building new concepts and status quos for well-established characters, and making them feel real. The first 25 issues of New Warriors explore many real-world concepts through a superhero lens, including things like one-night stands, the Vietnam War, the conflict in Bosnia, as well as the then-new-at-the-time gene mapping project. Night Thrasher is perhaps one of the best black characters that Marvel has ever produced. Like, literally, he is Batman with a skateboard, and if you don't think that no swearing, it is cool, I can't help you. All of that said, when I learned that Nicieza had written one of the Heroes Reborn event books, I was pumped. When I learned that Mark Bagley was going to be the one drawing it, I was beyond sold. Expertly written and expertly drawn comic books? Sign me up, baby. I will greenlight this ongoing series right now. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 12.19, Heroes Reborn, Young Allies. Our story opens in the American Southwest. We've been here before, and we open on a horseman. I mean that literally, like this guy has a humanoid body, but with hooves instead of feet, 3 fingers on each hand, and a horse head with long black hair. He is generally all white, save for his hair, which is black, and his pants, which are also white, but they've got black running along the sides. This guy is leaping along the landscape as red energy bolts are fired at him, bursting on the dirty ground. A wanted poster, picturing a young man with pointed ears, no eyebrows, a pointed goatee, and cowboy gear, is whipped in the wind as the horseman runs by, announcing that Kid Colt is wanted, dead or alive. Over this single-page image are blue narration boxes done by another character. The narration talks about that character, and she often asks herself, what would Cap do? Like 1,000 times a day she asks, what would Captain America do in this situation? Not even just this situation, but any situation, all situations. Quote, the world is a mess. How far can they go, should they go, to clean it up? End quote. Welcome back, tired, worrisome, bleak, bitter worldview. A squad of men equipped with armor, jetpacks, and plasma guns continue to chase our horseman, shooting desperately. The men are having trouble tracking the target. He's been giving them a rough time for 6 months. But even now, with him right in front of them, they're still having trouble shooting him. It's like he's popping in and out of thin air. Oh, like teleporting? One of the hunters comments that he wants to nail this guy. Rebel has been already giving them a ton of trouble, so they need a win. Oh, what's this? Did one of these books actually refer to another one of these books? 6 books in, 4 non-Claremontian issues gone, and finally one of these books acknowledges the existence of the others? Thank God. And sure, Rebel doesn't appear here, nor does he impact on our narrative, but holy floop, does this go a long way to making these books feel connected and as if they share a world. And after how utterly disconnected Remnants was, this is so nice. Fabian Nicieza, thank you. So the Horseman keeps dodging, right? And the armored dudes are getting annoyed. And then their infrared scanners pick up some nearby life signs. They spot a family hidden in a gas station and guess that the kid is delivering the food that he stole from their depot to this family. The armored dudes switch targets, telling the family that they are under the custody of S.H.I.E.L.D. by order of the president. Oh, okay, so we've got a president. That's nice to know. The kid stops running, shouting for the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to leave them alone. The agents then surround him, ordering Kid Colt to surrender peacefully and not to worry. The resistance occupants of the dead zone will be given fair accommodations. But the kid doesn't buy it. He knows how this works. The resistant occupants are just poor, hungry people who are trying to survive. Those fair accommodations will be a lab where the S.H.I.E.L.D. scientists can activate the gamma radiation in their bodies, turning them into Hulks. He knows all too much about those labs. He's clearly torn between running, helping the family, and surrendering, but he also can't really do any of those things. All of them would end just badly. Thankfully, he doesn't have to decide, because someone throws a roof at the armored men, slamming into 2 of them and scattering the rest. The agents turn as 2 other young people charge at them. They recognize the pair immediately. Bucky and Toro. Bucky is Ricky Barnes, the young woman who became Captain America's sidekick in Captain America Volume 2. She wears a blue top with billowing sleeves tucked into brown leather gloves. Worn, beaten brown metal boots cover her lower legs, while red fabric covers the rest. A big old pair of aviator goggles rest on her face, although her auburn hair hangs free and loose. An energy shield, eagle-shaped, is attached to the gauntlet of her right hand. Toro is Benito Serrano, and he's a biggin. Toro is big and muscular, his torso and arms covered in thick gray hair. His eyes are red, and a pair of white horns slide back from his face, blending into his black hair. Spiked metal armor covers his shoulders, connected by a ring in the center of his chest. The pair down the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in seconds, and Kid Colt is impressed. He's heard of the Young Allies before, but what are they doing here? The Young Allies had heard about him and wanted to scope him out. They need a teleporter for a big job in Europe, and Kid Colt seems to fit the bill. The kid transforms, reverting to his cowboy clothes-wearing human form. Toro does the same, shrinking slightly, but he is still a big dude in a shirt and jeans. Most of his head is shaved, save for a patch of black hair that is V-shaped running down the center. Kid then explains that he doesn't teleport. He can create, small closets in space, and he can stash stuff in there for retrieval later, but he's not really teleporting. Sometimes he can hop in space, but it's nothing amazing. It's only a couple feet at a time. He then demonstrates this, pulling the food that he stole from S.H.I.E.L.D. out of nowhere and giving it to those folks that they just rescued. Bucky says that she's got a friend who knows Elric better than he does himself. Kid Colt, or Elric Whitemane, chuckles, explaining that his name came from his hippie parents. But, what the hell? If Bucky and Toro can help him move this family someplace safe, yeah, he'll go with them. What has he got to lose? They're more than happy to help, if their aircraft can handle it. I don't know if it shows to you folks, but man, I am already digging this. I am excited and enjoying myself way more than I have the previous few episodes. And I chalk this up to how quickly Nicieza establishes his tone for this issue. We've seen that the Reborn Earth isn't exactly easy living. We've got flooded cities, a gamma-irradiated West, criminals run Chicago, Master Man rules Calivata, things suck. And initially, this tone is meant to justify rooting for Doctor Doom, as he is the only force powerful enough, clever enough, and ruthless enough to come out on top of things. And while Nyceza doesn't buck any of the established world traits of the Reborn world, he does present us a counter to them. With hope, with heroism, with 3 young people who are doing the right thing and saving lives, even if no one asked them to. Doom might save the planet, but he'll do that because he wants to rule it. Rebel might kill some of the Tabernacle, but he'll do it because he is searching for blue sky. But these guys, Kid Colt, Bucky, Toro, they just want to help those who need it, because that's the right thing to do. I love that the actual superheroes that the Reborn Earth gets are heroes that are directly inspired by those that left. Bucky was friends with Captain America, and even after he left her here, she's still trying to live up to the example that he set. Like Lancer, Bucky could have become bitter and angry about the heroes leaving and the chaos that followed. But instead, she chooses to do something about it, to help whoever she can, however she's able. That's what I want my superheroes to be, and goddamn, no swearing, if that doesn't make me happy. Bucky is the only character that we have seen before, as the spunky-driven side character in Captain America Volume 2. She basically looks the same here, save for the addition of the metal boots and the energy eagle shield thing. But she's lively, she's friendly, easily bantering and joking with Toro as they enter the scene. The pair are clearly used to each other with a friendliness that's refreshing in this world, even if I do find it a bit out of place compared to the rest of the line. I'm not saying that they can't be friendly or even be relaxed as they fight, but they kind of feel like teenagers written by a non-teenager, you know? Bucky calls the agents Phoebes as part of her battle cry, and who the hell says Phoebes? To be fair, Nyceza would have been 39 when he wrote this, so sure, he probably wasn't up on the latest slang, but come on, Phoebes. Toro pairs well with Bucky, clearly the brawn to her brains. And I don't mean that Bucky is super smart, but more that she is the field leader. She's the one directing them, and Toro is the one doing things. But he is also not an idiot, often getting the upper hand in their friendly banter. His overall design looks good, he complements with Bucky well, where he is large and bulky and she's small and wiry. Kid Colt, on the other hand, is weird. The whole concept for him is weird. In his human form, I would argue that Elric looks vaguely like an elf with his pointed ears and generally sharp features. But then he is dressed like a cowboy. We've got a button-up shirt, a black and white cow pattern vest, blue jeans, and a 10-gallon hat. And then he turns into a half-horse furry with limited teleportation powers. This feels like 3 different characters thrown into a blender, and the result was cast in the book. Despite that critique of his design, I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad. His horse form does look cool. I have always enjoyed monstrous characters like Beast or Archangel, or Disney's Gargoyle characters, and Elric fits into that I may look monstrous, but who I am matters more mold. I'm not sure if it's the most even character design that I've ever seen, but like I said, there is something about it that is appealing to me and just how strange it is. As for how Kid Colt got made, well, most of that is unknown to me, but I can guess at a bit of it. 'Cause here's the thing. Marvel and DC own a lot of characters, many of them stretching back to the 1940s. Some of them were popular at one time, then faded, while others would rise back up, ebbing and flowing with the interests of society. This is true of their war comics and their westerns and their romance books, and it should be no surprise that Marvel has published a Young Allies comic book once before, as well as a Kid Colt book. And every so often, Marvel will update one of those ideas and publish the new version in order to keep the copyright and trademark for them active. The original Young Allies were a kid gang led by Bucky during World War II and featured the sidekick of the original Human Torch, a character named Toro. So, Ricky and Benito are nods to and reinventions of those characters. Kid Colt, while never a young ally before, was the longest-running cowboy star in American comics. He featured in stories for a 31-year stretch of time, from 1948 to 1979, although a lot of the stuff after 1966 were just reprints. Elric's costume, the cowboy getup, it is the same as the original Kid Colt's. The elven features and the horse form are the new stuff, meant to adapt him to the more modern times and the setting of the Heroes Reborn world. What a solid opening. We immediately meet our main cast and see their powers and how they operate together. We get some good action sequences, and we have a mission. We are going to Europe. Now, we just need to find out why. The story then jumps to Germany, where the narration, referred to as the Crispy Earth Internet, which I don't really get, but okay, gives us an update on where the country is at the moment. In the recent past, the World Party was elected to power and has installed a sense of order and purpose in the country. This has come at the cost of some comforts, but Germany has remained largely untouched by the broader problems of the world. So, a nationalist force has taken over Germany once more, and the Young Allies are active, fighting in the world to preserve the lives of innocents and protect people, echoing the original Young Allies concept. That is neat. I dig that. That's neat. Inside of a high-tech lab facility, we see 5 scientists standing huddled in a group. Their shoulders are slumped, and some kind of helmet connected to the ceiling covers their entire head. A telepathic voice calls in their minds for number 3 to report. Once they do, their report matches what numbers 1 and 5 saw. The camera then spins around to show a dark glass tank, not quite circular in shape, just kind of blobby. A bubbling green fluid allows the thin, emaciated figure inside of it to float. Tubes connect to the technological diaper that he wears, but otherwise the figure is nude. A breathing apparatus with goggles attached covers his face, but this only serves to highlight how enormous the rest of his head is. The skull on this guy is about the same size as his torso, but thicker. A cushion is strapped to his head, which is in turn connected to the ceiling attached to an arm. I believe that's how this guy maneuvers in his tank. The figure monologues, explaining that numbers 1 through 6 are his eyes and ears in the world, empty minds piloted by his telepathy. Stage 2 of the operation, meaning the recruiting of Kid Colt, has been completed. Now they need to move on to Stage 3. Someone called Nortel is close to completing their experiment, and it needs to be stopped. They must tap into Kid Colt's full powers now. He reaches out to Ricky, but she's asleep on a bus. He could contact Benito instead, but no, better to let them sleep. Their bodies need rest after their exertions. His does not. This scene is a little weirder to me. We'll learn later on that this is Ishmael Questor, aka IQ, and he is clearly another member of the Young Allies based on him attempting to contact the others. But everything in this scene is played menacingly. The dark shot of Berlin, oppressive and bleak, the empty shells of the scientists, IQ's creepy alien design. There's something familiar with Toro and Colt's forms, probably because they're animal-esque, and that kind of puts me at ease because I'm familiar with that at least. IQ looks like a Martian or a little gray man, but he's green instead, and that freaks me out. His dialogue is also super dramatic, lending him an eerie, melodramatic air. This immediately makes me suspect him of something, rather than believe that he is actually part of the team. And I don't think that's the case, that's just kind of the way the scene feels for me. Aliens freak me out, folks. If I ever met E.T. in the woods, I'ma beat him to death. I like monstrous characters, not bug-eyed, big-brain, tiny-body-heavy alien freaks. They're creepy. Anyways, we move to Muir Island off the coast of Scotland, and Crispy Internet gives some information on its new owner, an oil and energy cartel originally from England's North Sea, a company called Nortel. Its CEO, Leland Walker, departs a sleek black helicopter and is greeted by some team leaders and scientists that work for him. The shipments from Heisengrau have arrived, but they pose a serious biological hazard. Walker isn't worried. He'll be the only one in danger. The project lead explains that they have acquired some sort of cosmic anomaly that touched down in Paris. Where it landed is now a square mile, 6-inch deep sea of a white viscous goo. The rest of Paris hasn't been heard from since. But the entity is fluctuating between two distinctive energy bandwidths, maybe some kind of embryonic evolution, they guess. Whatever this event is, it is unique when compared with the rest of the catastrophes that the reborn Earth has faced. This isn't the work of the apostate. Walker sighs. 4 weeks of study, and they are no closer to understanding it or controlling it. They're out of time. The scientists protest further action. The process could kill Walker, but the man remains stone-faced. The planet can't wait any longer. If you've got questions, so do I. All of this bit is new stuff. Some kind of cosmic thing has landed in Paris, and Nortel has been studying it. Walker's dialogue would indicate an altruistic goal with this energy thing. He seems to want to save the world, but this book is called Young Allies, not Young Allies and a middle-aged businessman, so I bet that this won't end well. The main thing that we're being told here is that this phenomenon is not part of the apostate's work, and while that isn't outright stated by Walker or his scientific team, it is hinted at in the dialogue so that we can figure out whatever's going on in this book is unique to whatever is going on in Claremont's stories. While Nyseza is clearly making an effort to interact with the sandbox that Claremont has built, he's also not trying to trip over any of Claremont's plot lines or interfere with his writing in any way. In Philadelphia, the bus carrying our heroes drops them off and they head to the brownstone where Ricky's grandparents live. Richard and Peggy Barnes hug the teens and shake hands, happy to see them all alive. Grandpa Richard is surprised to see them exit a bus, and Benito explains that their craft finally died. Elric was able to land them without killing them all, but they had to cut a deal with the Black Knight to get through Chicago. What's this? Even more interconnectivity between these books? Why, it's almost like Nyseza is trying to build a whole new world where one book's narrative can impact another. How refreshing. Even if that does mess up my timeline for these books. But I'm still happy with having Young Allies here, as it is the most hopeful book out of the entire line, and I feel like that energy is better spent rolling us into the final issue than sending us into the relatively disconnected rest of the line, so I'm leaving it where it's at. The group eats, and Grandma Peggy asks Benito how Ricky is holding up. Benito says that she keeps the rest of them held up emotionally. She's the strong one here. He adds that it is good for her to come home, though. It helps her recharge her spirit. Upstairs, in Ricky's room, she and her grandfather are on the computer. He had been trying to keep track of all the emails and websites that she asked him to, but he isn't confident of how good a job he did in Kids with Their Technology. Ricky says that he did a great job, but she asks if she could have some time to just surf by herself and get caught up on modern events. After Grandpa leaves, Ricky emails Ishmael, and when he replies, they switch to communicating telepathically. Nortel has been gathering a bunch of stuff that Ishmael thinks they will try to use to control what he is referring to as the Rip. They are very likely trying to turn someone into a living conduit for those energies, and if the host survives, they could have absolute power. So they need to stop him. Later, after dessert, the Young Allies are costumed up and ready to go, but Elric isn't sure about their plan. Bucky explains that IQ can tap into Elric's powers, allowing him to teleport them all across the Atlantic. But Elric has had his mind and body played with before. That's how he got the whole horse body thing. He isn't a fan of this idea. IQ sympathizes with Elric. He knows about the strange course that his life has taken. We then go into flashback mode and see that 3 years ago an alien ship belonging to a race called the Chimelians crashed on Earth. The only occupant was dead when S.H.I.E.L.D. got there and took everything into custody. Inside the ship, they found data about mixing chameleon and human DNA, and that sure sounded interesting. So, they searched for suitable candidates and found Elric Freedom. S.H.I.E.L.D. threatened his parents and basically just took custody of the boy. They experimented on him, and hey, it worked. His DNA accepted the chameleon DNA, giving him his horse form and spatial warping powers. He escaped them using said powers, started calling himself Kid Colt because he's a Western fan, and took the surname Whitemane. While the audience sure appreciates this expositional explanation, that is a creepy amount of information for IQ to have. Elric asks, why should he trust him? This isn't exactly an endearing moment, dude. And okay, that's fair. IQ then explains his own origin story. He was born atrophied, quadriplegic, with severe cranial swelling. The doctors gave him only hours to live, but they didn't know about his telepathy. Instinctively, he could feel his parents' love, and that gave him the strength to go on. But he was just a baby and couldn't handle the sensory overload that came with all those powers. His parents turned him over to a German research facility, hoping that they would help their son. Ishmael spent the next 16 years inside of a nutrient tank, until he hit puberty. The experiments finally pushed him too far, and he lashed out in pain and anger. This wiped the minds of those studying him, making them his puppets. He then surfed the internet, growing his knowledge, and discovered Bucky's Young Allies group. Knowing of her grudge against the World Party, who were the group studying Ishmael, he contacted Bucky, and she fought for his freedom. They've been allies ever since. Bucky says that all of them have suffered. Her brother John died fighting for the World Party, and Benito's experiences in Colombia at the hands of the cartels? You don't want to hear those stories. Elric sighs, he gets it. And if they really think that he can help, then he will. IQ taps into Kid Colt's brain and, sure enough, they make it to Muir Island. It's a rough trip, but they're there. Before we move on, though, let's review. First off, I like Ricky's grandparents being alive and well and in support of her actions. Family was a big part of Ricky's character back in Captain America. I mean, she basically became Bucky in order to save her brother, so that's a nice win and a good through line for these two very different runs. Elric's origin, as weird as it is actually tied into Marvel continuity. The Chameleons are a race of aliens that basically look like bipedal horses. Shocking, I know. They're a fairly advanced race and featured heavily in the 80s era comic book Power Pack. The Chameleon who came to Earth in Power Pack is the same Chameleon found dead on Reborn Earth. So that's an interesting way of taking some established continuity and then taking it somewhere new on this other world. I do have the same problem with this that I did with Remnants, that none of this was established on Reborn Earth to begin with. And sure, Franklin Richards spent years hanging out with the cast of Power Pack when he was younger, so he would know about the Chameleons and their existence and stuff, but the Power Pack didn't enter Onslaught. So why would Franklin create the Chameleons inside of the Reborn Earth Pocket Universe, but then not the Power Pack? That just seems odd and incongruous. Again, the rules of Reborn Earth are played with fast and loose. Oh, and the Chameleon who crashed was named Alefire Whitemane, so that's actually where Elric got his new last name. Ishmael's background is all new, the only established element being the existence of the World Party. We do learn that the people he's controlling were mind-wiped accidentally, which at least makes him seem less sinister, but he still feels cold, distant, and generally dangerous. This also seems to tell us that Bucky recruited IQ before Toro, as he isn't present for the Trash the World party. Clearly, Bucky trusts this guy, but I have to admit that I don't, not yet. Floopin' aliens, man. So the Young Allies have arrived on Muir Island at the Nortel facility. Elric vomits from the teleportation effect, while Bucky lowers her goggles over her eyes. IQ fed her a security schematic for the building so that they can be sure to dodge any alarms. Which is when one of the sensors goes off. Elric adjusts his hat bashfully. He may have puked on one of those sensors. A handful of guards rush out of the building, armored and armed, and Bucky jumps at them. She jokes how the guards would be amazed at her equipment, explaining that she has vibranium soles on her boots, vibranium brass knuckles, and a vibranium photonic shield. Whew, that is a lot of vibranium, man. Wakanda's gotta be hunting for her big time. Between her weapons and her combat skills, Bucky downs the guards easily. Elric and Benito watch appreciatively as she finishes things up. She says that she had better get her shots in now, because if they have to fight a cosmically powered bad guy in this place, she is going to be way outclassed. Speaking of, Leland Walker has put on a containment suit attached to the pod containing the Rip with large cables. He quotes Archimedes regarding a lever, signaling his team. "They throw the lever, Kronk!" And energy pours from the Rip into Walker. The Allies enter the facility and approach the door to the chamber with Leland inside. When asked how they'll get inside of it, Benito replies by transforming into Toro. He then smashes through the massive door, like it looks like one of those submarine doors with like a crank handle in the center and it's like 4 feet thick. But the group can barely appreciate Toro's strength before a wave of green and white energy washes over them, shoving the entire team back. Floating inside the room, his body straining to process the alien energies that he is engulfed in, is Walker. Finally, he says, his voice booming, he has the power to confront doom and save their world. Toro quietly points out that isn't something a bad guy would say. IQ jumps in here. He has processed the current energy readings and data regarding the Ripped, including a theory that Nortel scientists put forth, guessing that the Rip might actually be an evolving, alive alien life form. By absorbing it, though, Walker is potentially killing it. Despite this conversation happening telepathically, Walker somehow still manages to respond to it. What is one alien life sacrificed to save millions of human lives? The various disasters that the Reborn Earth have suffered are because of the gods fighting over this world, referring to the apostate. With this power, though, Walker can act as humanity's representative and put them on the game board. The young allies should understand. They're soldiers in their own way. They're willing to die in the name of a cause. They know the value of a sacrifice. But Bucky freezes at this. She comes back to the question that she always asks. WWCAD. What would Captain America do? She takes a deep breath, knowing that the others are waiting on her to make a move first. And she makes a decision, praying that it's the right one. Quietly, Bucky says that this isn't right. Yes, they are willing to risk their lives, but that's because they know the risks. They accept the potential cost. But this life form, whatever it is, it doesn't have a say in what's happening to it. Walker doesn't get to just decide for it. The Mad nods, saying that he understands Bucky's perspective, but he can't agree with it. There's just too much at stake. He tells the young allies to leave, or he'll destroy them. Toro then starts a-swinging, asking Bucky for a plan. IQ explains that they need to redirect the Rip's energy away from Walker, or he's just going to continuously draw from it and remain super powerful. There is a brief struggle as Walker waves energy at the team, and then they dodge it, and then they try to punch him, and then it keeps happening. But it's Kid Colt who ultimately saves the day. He opens a portal, interrupting Walker's energy intake flow, and then he teleports that energy back to the Rip. The energy that is left inside of Walker collapses in upon itself, consuming him and then stabilizing into a new form. A hunched-over body, vaguely masculine, with red eyes and a red mouth, its form made of some kind of ashy darkness, stands before them now. It assures the young allies that they have nothing to fear from them. Walker's fate was of his own making. Okay, so he's dead? Bucky asks. The form then shifts again, now turning into a slim woman with long hair and a body of shifting light. Like, most of her form is composed of just pure white light, but the areas where shading would be are like blue squiggle lines, indicating a form and a shape without really using darkness. She says that Walker's essence no longer exists, at least until it can be returned to the All, with a capital A. Great. Sounds good. Second question then. Are you two entities, sharing one body? Elric jumps in here, complimenting her on that body. The woman doesn't even acknowledge the comment. She explains that her body is just a representation of the ideas that they are. She is life, light, order. And then she shifts back into the black form of entropy, death, and chaos. Toro blinks. They are literally talking to, like, order and chaos? Elric chimes in, deciding to call them OK, meaning order and chaos. Yeah, chaos with a K. And the name seems fine with them. They're more interested in their mission, which is examining whether or not the reborn Earth merits a continued existence. Order tends to favor that outcome, while chaos is more open to ideas. Bucky then invites them to stay with the young allies from here on out. They're fighting for the world, so that would be a good way for OK to explore it, and judge its worthiness, I guess. This would also be a great way for the young allies to keep an eye on this powerful pair. OK agrees to this, and the book basically ends. Like, the whole team is happy to have saved the day and made some new friends, and it just stops. Okay, so it can't all be good. Sue me. This is undoubtedly my favorite of the branching off Reborn books. I think it's fun, I think its cast is weird, and then that's fun. I love the overall positive vibe the cast and the book have, and I love that it focuses on one of the few characters that were unique to the Reborn books, namely Bucky. Rebel was a bait and switch, where Bucky is honestly just a nice return to form. Sure, this isn't some deep dive into her psychology or how she's handled being abandoned on a fake Earth, but she is the heart of this book, and it does do her justice. I love her constantly trying to live up to Captain America's standard and slowly learning how to judge what's right and what's wrong. Captain America might be a living legend, but he's also just a guy, and he has no more of an internal guidance system than Bucky does. He does what he thinks is right, period. And as shown here, so does Bucky. Growing confident in those decisions is another thing entirely, which is where we are now with her story. It's almost weird to read a book where the heroes actually value an alien life form, given how nonchalant the Marvel heroes have been over the last few years about killing dangerous aliens. But I like this, as it highlights that all life has worth, even in alien life, and that freedom is the right of all sentient beings, thank you, Optimus Prime. Walker can't force his decision upon the alien. It should be free to choose its fate for itself. Having Bucky be the one to reach that conclusion is an excellent idea. While I know it's not her fate, I would love to see her take up the mantle of Captain America one day on Reborn Earth and inspire a whole new generation of heroes. That said, Walker isn't much of a bad guy for this book. I like that he had some depth and that his motivation was a noble one, even if his methods were questionable. I like him being aware of the manipulations of the apostate, even if he isn't aware of the apostate itself, and I especially like that Nyceza acknowledges the broader story going on in the Reborn event books. Again, Young Allies feels like it's occupying the same space as the other books, where the rest of the books felt really isolated from each other. I kind of wish that Walker had, been a worse person, especially since that we've been shown that the people of Reborn Earth are tougher, harder, and meaner. They've had to be in order to survive. But Walker seems like a pretty fine person, risking only his own life, and that of an alien, sure, and not one of his underlings or doing something like that. Plus, keeping Walker altruistically motivated makes his actions harder for Bucky to reconcile. If he was just evil like the Red Skull or something, then Bucky would have had no problem fighting him. She would have automatically thought that he was the bad guy and that he was evil, and everything that he was doing was wrong. But Walker isn't evil, and so she struggles to make the right call a little bit. And again, as the heart of this book, that's a good choice to make. Okay is a weird concept, although not that weird in the world of comic books. Conceptual ideas take on physical form all the time in Marvel Comics. Thanos has kissed the hand of death, Doctor Strange has given a ball to eternity, the Silver Surfer has saved the life of infinity before, Genis Vell, who was once Captain Marvel, has evolved into the universe itself at one point. Order and chaos are just the newest iteration of that idea. Them wrestling with the fate of Reborn Earth is an interesting idea, too. Sure, Ashima may have made the decision to keep it going, but should she be allowed to do so? The problem with so interesting an idea is that it's almost too big for this book. That feels like something that should affect the entire planet and our main narrative. But nope, it's happening in a book that is only ever going to be referenced by its actual author, so it kinda just doesn't matter. Their character designs are pretty neat, though. I like Chaos's always shifting form, giving him a monstrous, amorphous, kinda blocky look. Order, on the other hand, is so bright that you can't really see anything about her, despite being much more defined physically. They balance well, and I like the idea of them sharing space, so you only get one character or the other, but then they switch pretty frequently. Order and Chaos aren't separate entities. One entity leads to the creation of the other. It's necessary, and it's part of the natural cycle, and I think that's really smart. Overall, this is easily the funnest, most enjoyable book for me. The characters are bright and lively, and they bounce off of each other well with a real familiar ease, and they all look different and unique. The overall tone here injects some much-needed heroism into the Reborn Earth, too. Remnants tried to lighten the tone by being silly and irreverent, doing whatever it felt like doing because who cares? All of this is fake, made-up stories anyways. But it didn't actually give me any lighter, uplifting emotions to feel, so that I would honestly feel better. Young Allies makes me hopeful, and so it ends up having a much stronger impact on me. Artistically, I am a huge Mark Bagley fan. I've spoken about Bagley before, back in Venom Lethal Protector, and he continues to do solid work here. All of the cast look unique and interesting, their world looks worn down and beaten, and all of the action flows well. Bagley is inked by Al Vey here, and I do think that Vey uses a thicker, scratchier line than is normally used over Bagley's pencils. The line work maybe feels a little bit rushed to me, it's just missing a bit of polish. I think that Bagley would have been drawing Thunderbolts during the time that this comic was published, so there is a chance that Young Allies was a rush job, so maybe his pencils were looser than normal, and that meant Al Vey had to finish more of the work. But, to be fair, Bagley is a very fast artist. I have seen him keep up with a book double shipping in 1 month before, so it's possible that he could handle Thunderbolts and Young Allies at the same time. But like I said, this does feel rougher than what he normally produces. It could be that that's just how Al Vey inks, and it could have nothing at all to do with Bagley's initial line work, but I'll likely ever know. Ultimately, this is still a good-looking book, and I'm not really complaining about the art, I just don't feel that it's Bagley's normal work right here. Jason Wright's colors are darker and muted throughout the issue. Nothing in this book pops like I expect a superhero comic to. It's all kind of drab and dirty. There is a lot of brown, dark green, and muted yellow, and just gray in this comic. This fits the overall tone of the world, but not the overall tone of the story, which is ultimately a hopeful one. The coloring isn't bad at all, it is technically well done, but I feel like it's missing some pizzazz. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say that I want this book to look more like a standard superhero comic, and it just doesn't, and I'm upset about that. What a refreshing read. I kind of want to go and dig out my Thunderbolts collection and reread the stories featuring these weirdos. It has been years since I read through those books, so that might be fun. Anyways, Obviously, I dig this issue, and I place it here in my collection specifically because it gets me amped up and excited for what's to come next. Every other book in this run is kind of a bummer, and we are going into the endgame, so I want some energy in me. I want some life. We've got the fate of a world on the line, and we need to be ready for that. Next week, we return to where it all began, under the pen of author Chris Claremont and pencil of Mike McKone. While we've been bouncing around the globe, exploring Reborn Earth and its new characters, Doom has actually done the same, creating a powerful alliance so that he might begin to make his move against the apostate. But Doom's new allies are some of the most dangerous people on the Reborn world. Can he trust that they won't stab him in the back? And even with their added might, how can one man stand against a Celestial? Join me next week in Comic Book Breakdown episode 12.20, Heroes Reborn, Doom. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me, to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.